Transfer the $9.8 million estate to your sister, Dad commanded, pushing the file across a silent room. I refused. Mom's slap rang like thunder. You have no choice. The attorney went still. Do you realize who actually? Dad exploded. No what? Can you imagine being told to sign away nearly $10 million to your sister and then, when you dared to say no, your own mother slapped you across the face? My world tilted in that moment. What the hell happened next, you ask? Well, let me tell you, it was a long time coming. It was a Sunday, and the air in our living room was so thick with unspoken expectations, you could almost taste it. My father, calm as ice, slid a folder across the polished oak table with just 2 fingers. Not a single word raised, but his voice, it was chilling. Sign the transfer, he said. All $9.8 million to your sister. The folder rasped, a tiny, abrasive sound, stopping just short of my hands, as if even inanimate objects understood the invisible boundaries they were setting around me. The whole house felt staged. That sharp, cloying smell of lemon cleaner caught in my throat. The heavy, sweet scent of roast chicken mingled with the faint, dusty heat from vents that had just kicked on, trying to make it feel homey. Folding chairs were aligned against the walls, like extra ribs in a body that suddenly felt too small, designed to trap me. I stared at the paper, my name already typed, bold and unavoidable beneath a blank line. The language was cold, legal, confidently sealing my fate. I looked up at my father's face. He had that familiar look, you know? The one he always wore when he truly believed he was being reasonable. Utter, unshakable certainty. I'm not signing, I said. The words didn't land gently. They hit the room like a dropped plate in a silent restaurant, echoing in the sudden, sharp hush. A ripple moved through the room. Tiny, involuntary shifts, a shallow swallow, a cough someone tried desperately to stifle. My sister, Karen, her smile flickered at the corner for half a second, then snapped back into something polished and tight. She sat near the center of the table, perfectly composed in cream slacks and a pale blue blouse, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was like she'd been practicing her reasonable daughter pose in a mirror all week. Her husband's hand rested on the back of her chair, fingers curved, almost possessive. Then my mother stood up. So fast her chair scraped the floor with an ugly, metallic screech. Her perfume, sweet and floral and way too strong, hit me first, a sharp warning before her hand did. Smack, a searing heat flashed across my cheek. And then, that strange numbness rolled in, like my skin couldn't decide whether to scream or just shut down. My mouth filled with copper, sharp and sour, and my eyes watered reflexively even as my face stayed still. You don't have a choice, she screamed, her voice cracking. Do you hear me? You don't. Someone gasped. Not a person stepping in, just a sound. The room inhaling and then collectively forgetting how to exhale. I kept my hand flat on the table. I didn't touch my face. I didn't look down. I refused to give her the reaction she craved. My family, they always fed on reactions. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I shouted, I was unstable. If I flinched, I was weak. Stillness was the only response they couldn't twist into a story where they were the victims. Mr. Caldwell, the family lawyer, slowly rose, adjusting his glasses with careful, almost delicate fingers. His suit was too crisp for a Sunday, and his leather briefcase sat at his feet like a silent punctuation mark. He looked at my mother's raised hand, then at my cheek, then at the folder, as if suddenly seeing the paper itself as a weapon. Ma'am, he began carefully, do you know who really? My father exploded before the sentence could finish. No. What? He roared, slamming his palm on the table so hard the good dishes rattled and a water glass shivered. What are you even implying? Every head turned. Every breath held. The clock kept ticking anyway, indifferent to family and money and control. I looked at my father, really looked at him, at the certainty etched into his face. The confidence of a man who believed the ground beneath him was solid because, for him, it always had been. You really don't know, I said quietly. Confusion spread across the room like a slow leak. My father laughed once, sharp and dismissive, like ridicule could somehow rewrite reality. Don't start, he snapped. You've always had trouble accepting reality. Reality, the The word he used like a leash. Asterisk, be realistic. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Karen needs this more than you. You'll be fine. Asterisk, my mother's eyes were bright with anger. She's being selfish, she spat. She always does this. Makes things difficult after everything we've done for her. I lifted my hand slightly, palm facing down. Not to defend myself, but to slow the room, the way you do when you're controlling a situation without raising your voice. I'm not signing, I repeated. And before anyone says another word, you should hear why. Karen leaned forward, her eyes glossy in that practiced way, her voice soft and careful, like she was speaking to a child. Or just trying to keep the family together, she said. You're barely even here anymore. You have your career, your life. There it was. The familiar framing. Asterisk, I had enough. Therefore, I should give. Asterisk, if I refused, I was the reason the family couldn't be together. I closed the folder gently and pushed it back across the table. The cardboard slid over the oak like a definitive decision. You didn't invite me here to talk, I said. You invited me to comply. A murmur moved through the room. A bracelet clinked against a glass. Someone shifted in a folding chair and then froze again. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, his voice steady but edged with concern. Before any documents are signed, there are clarifications we need to make. My father's head snapped toward him. This is straightforward. It may not be, Mr. Caldwell replied, his gaze unwavering. My mother's eyes darted between us. What does that mean? I leaned back in my chair. The sting on my cheek had dulled into an ache that promised a bruise later. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the air before a storm breaks. It means, I said, you're asking me to sign away something you don't actually control. Silence pressed against my ears. My father stared at me, his jaw tightening, as if he could squeeze the truth back into whatever shape he preferred. You're confused, he said. No, I replied. I'm prepared. Karen gave a nervous, brittle laugh. This is ridiculous. Is it? I asked, standing slowly. Not dramatic, not defiant. Controlled. In uniform, I'd learned that speed can look like panic, but calm looks like certainty. Before we go any further, I said, you should understand how we got here, because this didn't start today, and it didn't start with money. I looked around the living room, at faces I'd known forever. Faces that had watched me grow up and decided long ago what role I was allowed to play. The house had been rearranged for this, furniture pushed back. Chairs added, the long oak table positioned like a stage. 23 people, maybe more. Enough witnesses to make sure no one could later claim they'd misunderstood. Outside, the street had been crowded with cars when I arrived. My aunt's Lexus, my uncle's old pickup, 2 sedans from church. The kind of gathering that didn't happen unless something important or ugly was about to be announced. My mother had called 3 days earlier, her voice overly sweet, stretched tight like plastic wrap. Just family, she'd said. Nothing formal. We all need to be on the same page. Those words should have warned me. Same page never meant understanding. It meant agreement. It started years ago, I said, when I learned what happens to the child everyone assumes will be fine. Growing up, my family never called it favoritism. They didn't need to. Favoritism was just the floor plan of our lives. Karen was 3 years older than me, and in our house, that translated into permanent seniority. She was first. First grandchild, first steps, first smile everyone remembered. By the time I arrived, the family narrative had already been written and Karen's name was printed in bold at the top. She was the organized one, the dependable one, the one with leadership qualities. Karen's report cards went on the refrigerator. Mine went into a drawer. Karen's mistakes were learning experiences. Mine were attitude. When Karen cried, my mother rushed. When I cried, I was told I was strong. When Karen struggled, my father intervened. When I struggled, my father reminded me I'd always been independent. You'll be fine, they'd say over and over, like a blessing, like a dismissal. At dinner, Karen sat beside my father, updating him on her plans like a junior partner. He listened, nodding, offering advice, asking questions that showed he cared about details. When I spoke, conversations paused politely, then drifted back to Karen as if my words were a commercial break. I learned early that attention was currency I didn't have. In middle school, when Karen joined student council, my parents rearranged their schedules to attend meetings. When I qualified for an academic competition, my mother smiled and said, "That's nice, honey," before reminding me Karen had practice. It wasn't cruelty with a soundtrack. That was what made it hard to explain. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches, just 1,000 small recalibrations where my needs were adjusted downward to make room for hers. Karen needed a new car for college. I took the bus. Karen changed majors twice. My tuition came with reminders to be grateful. Karen moved back home after graduation to figure things out. When I stayed home too long after high school, my father asked when I planned to do something real. So, I joined the military at 22. People assume it was a calling. It wasn't. It was an exit. The day I signed my enlistment papers, my father shook my hand like I'd accepted a job at a factory across town. Good benefits, he said. Structure. Karen hugged me and whispered, I could never do that, like fear was a virtue. Basic training stripped me down to nothing and rebuilt me piece by piece. The yelling didn't bother me. I'd grown up translating tone into survival. What surprised me was how clear everything was. In uniform, effort mattered. Precision mattered. Documentation mattered. Nobody asked whose daughter I was. Nobody expected me to shrink so someone else could shine. For the first time in my life, being quiet didn't make me invisible. It made me observant. I learned how systems actually worked. How one missing signature could stall an entire operation. How people hide mistakes inside miscellaneous and expect no one to look. How numbers tell stories if you pay attention. How rules exist not just to control people, but to keep chaos from pretending it's order. When I came home on leave, the contrast was brutal. Karen was helping my parents manage things, investments, accounts, paperwork. My father bragged about her to anyone who'd listen. She's got a head for business, he'd say. Just like me. No one asked what I did in the military. When they did, they stopped listening halfway through the answer, eyes drifting away as if my life was inconveniently real. You don't need to worry about money, my mother told me once over coffee, stirring sugar so hard the spoon clinked against the mug. Karen's taking care of that side of things. That phrase stuck. That side of things, like money, was a personality trait. Like responsibility was hereditary. The only person who never spoke that way was my grandmother, Eleanor. My father's mother. Eleanor lived alone in a modest house with creaky floors and a view of the back alley, not the bay. Her kitchen smelled like black coffee and lemon soap. She watched everything and commented on very little, like someone who understood that sometimes silence is assessment. When I visited, she asked real questions. What are you learning? She'd ask. What do you notice? What doesn't make sense? One afternoon, she spread papers across her kitchen table in careful stacks, weighted down with an old glass paperweight shaped like an apple. Sunlight came through the blinds in narrow stripes, turning every page edge into a bright line. I want your eyes on these, she said, tapping the nearest pile. Not your opinion. Your eyes. I sat down and began where I always did, dates, headings, totals, rental income summaries, investment distributions, maintenance expenses. At a glance, everything looked tidy. Too tidy, I flipped a page, then another. The same vendor name appeared 3 times in one quarter. Emergency repairs, all under the same threshold. Each approved by Karen. Each paid promptly. That roof can't be replaced 3 times in 4 months, I said without looking up. Eleanor nodded but didn't smile. I kept going. A line item labeled miscellaneous administrative costs ballooned year over year. Travel reimbursements tied to site visits that didn't match lease renewal dates. Checks written instead of electronic transfers, just often enough to avoid patterns a casual reviewer might notice. It wasn't theft in the movie sense. It was something far more familiar. Assumption. The assumption no one would look closely. That even if someone did, they wouldn't understand. That if they understood, they wouldn't push back. I exhaled slowly. These accounts aren't structured the way Dad says they are. Eleanor folded her hands. No, she said. They aren't. She reached for a folder I hadn't opened yet. Heavier, crisp edges, executed trust documents, county seals, witness lines. A revocable trust established years earlier, assets listed meticulously, properties, accounts, contingencies. And one clause that made my breath catch. Successor. Authority. My name. Not beneficiary. Authority. I looked up at her. When did you do this? When I realized, she said calmly, that love doesn't stop people from making selfish decisions. It just makes them better at justifying them. She didn't say my father's name. She didn't need to. I didn't want conflict, she continued. I wanted continuity. Someone who would protect what exists, not drain it for validation. She studied my face like she was measuring whether I could carry something heavy without turning it into a weapon. You know how to do that. I swallowed. Karen won't take this well. Eleanor's mouth twitched. Karen has always taken well to applause. This isn't that. She slid the folder toward me. Keep copies, she said. And keep quiet. I did both. After that day, patterns sharpened. Karen's lifestyle grew more expensive than her salary could justify. My parents' stories about their assets changed depending on who was listening. Paperwork was always handled. Questions were always unnecessary. Curiosity was framed as distrust. And distrust was framed as betrayal. Eleanor never accused anyone out loud. She didn't need to. She trusted paper more than people. And she trusted me to read it. When Eleanor passed 18 months later, grief hit me sideways. She had been the one place in my family where I didn't have to translate myself. Losing her felt like losing gravity. The funeral was dignified, controlled. People praised her foresight, her generosity, her devotion to family. The morning after, my mother called. We should talk about the assets, she said gently. Not about Eleanor, about the assets. I declined politely, firmly. Then the pressure began, the way pressure always begins in families like mine. Soft at first, like a hand on your back that claims it's guiding you while it's actually pushing. My mother left voicemails that started with, "We're just worried about you," and ended with, "Karen has been carrying so much." Karen texted from a new number, as if changing digits could change reality. Dad's health isn't what it used to be. This is about stability. You don't even live here anymore. The messages never said, "Give me the money." They said, "Be a good daughter. Be a good sister. Be the person who makes this easy for everyone else." I didn't respond. I archived everything. I met with an independent attorney, someone who didn't know my family, didn't attend our church, didn't owe my father favors. He reviewed the trust, the filings, the recorded instruments. "It's solid," he said, tapping the seal. "Very intentionally structured. Who can change it?" I asked. "No one," he replied. "Not without your cooperation." That was the moment the weight of it settled into my chest. Not triumph, not fear. Responsibility. I wasn't holding money. I was holding a boundary someone else had built and trusted me to enforce. Then the invitation arrived by email. Subject line, "Family discussion Sunday." No agenda, no details, just a time and my parents' address. I almost didn't go, not because I was afraid, but because part of me already knew how it would unfold. I could hear the arguments before they were spoken. I could see the expressions. I could feel the weight of being outnumbered in a room designed to make dissent feel rude. But avoidance would have confirmed their assumptions. So I went. The morning of the meeting, I pressed my uniform carefully, even though I wasn't going to wear it. Old instincts die hard. Order before confrontation. Preparation before impact. I chose neutral clothes. Nothing defensive. Nothing defiant. I pinned my hair back the way I did for inspections, a small, private ritual of control. When I arrived, my mother hugged me too tightly, arms stiff, cheek pressed to mine in a gesture that looked affectionate from a distance, but felt like restraint up close. "We're glad you're here," she said, already steering me toward the living room. The house had been rearranged. Furniture pushed back, chairs added, the good dishes out, folding chairs lined the walls. It was a tribunal disguised as hospitality. Karen looked up and smiled. "I'm really glad you came," she said. "This doesn't have to be uncomfortable." That was the line she always used right before things became exactly that. My father waited until everyone sat before speaking. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I'd driven far. He went straight to the point. We need clarity, he said. We can't keep operating in uncertainty. Karen nodded. It's not fair to anyone. Anyone, not everyone. Mr. Caldwell opened his briefcase with a soft click. We've prepared a straightforward transfer, he said. It's meant to consolidate assets under one managing party, and that party is Karen, my mother added, because she's here, she's invested. She's been doing the work. Then my father slid the folder toward me and told me to sign. And I said no. And my mother slapped me. And the room froze. And the lawyer tried to warn them. And my father tried to drown the warning with anger. And then I pulled out the fireproof folder and let the paper speak. When my father finally demanded, if you're not signing, then tell us what you think you know. I didn't argue. I reached down, lifted my bag onto the table with a soft thud, unzipped it, and pulled out the slim charcoal gray folder with the metal clasp. Click. The sound cut through the room sharper than the slap had. Karen leaned back. What is that? She asked, trying for laughter. Are you serious right now? Mr. Caldwell's posture changed. Lawyers recognize preparation the way soldiers recognize a weapon being checked. I didn't bring opinions, I said. I brought records. I slid the first document onto the table and let the paper speak before my mouth did. Mr. Caldwell leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, read silently, then frowned. This is a recorded trust, he said slowly. My father scoffed. We already have a trust. Mr. Caldwell didn't look up. Not like this. I placed the second page down, then the third. Each aligned carefully, edges squared, like I'd been trained to do. Karen's smile vanished. You're embarrassing yourself, she snapped. You don't even understand, Karen, Mr. Caldwell said quietly. Please stop talking. That alone stunned the room. He checked the county seal, the recording number, the date. Then he flipped to the signature page. My name, not on the document they demanded I sign today. Already there. My mother's voice shook. That doesn't mean anything. Eleanor was old. She didn't know. She knew exactly what she was doing, Mr. Caldwell said, sharper now. This was executed years ago, properly, with witnesses, with independent counsel. My father stood so fast his chair toppled backward. No, he said. That's not possible. I slid one more page forward. The designation of authority. Clear. Unambiguous. Karen lunged forward, grabbing for the papers. This is fake. Mr. Caldwell caught her wrist midair. Do not touch that. She froze, breath fast, eyes wide. Mr. Caldwell turned to my parents. Do you know who really holds decision-making authority over these assets? He asked again, voice calm but final. My mother opened her mouth. No sound came out. My father's face drained of color. We're the parents, he said weakly. They're family assets. Mr. Caldwell shook his head. They are not. He looked at me then, not as their daughter, but as his client. You are the acting authority, he said. You always have been. The room deflated. It didn't explode so much as collapse inward. Whispers rose like steam. Oh my God, that changes everything. Karen's husband stood back from her chair like he'd just realized it was bolted to something rotten. You said this was settled, he said to her, his voice flat. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes wide. You planned this, she whispered at me. Behind our backs? No, I said. You ignored it. My father rounded on me, rage flickering behind fear. You let us plan this meeting, he accused. You let us invite people? Yes, I said evenly. Because I was told I didn't have a choice. Karen's voice broke. You did this to hurt me? I looked at her fully. No, I said. I did this to stop you. Mr. Caldwell gathered the documents into a neat stack, his voice steady. There is nothing to transfer. The assets are already placed. There is no legal mechanism for what you're asking. My father sank back into his chair, his hands shaking. All this time, he whispered. All this time, we thought, you assumed, I said softly. Karen shook her head, tears streaking down her face. This isn't fair. I met her gaze. Neither was being told my whole life that I didn't matter. My mother stared at me like she was seeing something she couldn't control. We raised you, she said, her voice brittle. You owe us. I closed the folder and clasped it shut. Click. I don't owe you my silence, I replied. No one argued after that. There was nothing left to argue about. The truth had taken the floor, and it wasn't yielding. I picked up my bag slowly. This meeting is over, I said. And so is the assumption that I will always step aside. I left before anyone could stop me. The sun was low, shadows long across the driveway. I paused beside my car and listened to muffled voices inside, confused, overlapping, stripped of certainty. Then I got in, closed the door, and drove away. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No replaying conversations, no rehearsing defenses, just the steady quiet that comes when a decision is no longer theoretical. The fallout began the next morning. Mr. Caldwell called first. His voice was professional, but different now. Careful, respectful. There will be adjustments, he said. Some things your parents believed were in motion simply aren't. I thanked him and ended the call. By noon, Karen had called 6 times. I didn't answer. By evening, the family group chat was exploding. Messages stacked like bricks. How could you do this to us? Mom hasn't stopped crying. You embarrassed Dad. This isn't what Grandma would have wanted. I read each message once, then muted the thread. Instead, I opened my laptop and did what I'd been trained to do. Review, verify, document. Within 48 hours, I engaged an independent management firm to oversee the assets. Not friends, not family. Professionals with procedures and paper trails. The first call felt almost soothing. Names, credentials, protocols, clear steps, contingencies. No emotion, no guilt. Just structure. We set up dual authentication on accounts, restricted access, created oversight protocols that made quiet skimming impossible. Standardized maintenance schedules, formalized vendor selection. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I wanted the system to stop relying on trust in people who had proven they preferred applause to accountability. Nothing dramatic happened next. No instant justice, just slow consequences, the kind that arrive like paperwork processed in the background while people are still arguing about feelings. Karen's lifestyle began unraveling almost immediately. Credit cards flagged, accounts froze, pending review, discretionary spending held. The things she treated as normal, weekend getaways, designer purchases filed as business expenses, expensive dinners labeled client development, suddenly required explanation. Her husband moved out within a week. The reason he gave, I heard later, was one word: misrepresentation. My parents sold the lake house quietly, then the second car, then my mother's jewelry collection piece by piece to an estate broker she'd once looked down on. They moved into a smaller place near the highway. Not ruined, but reduced. I heard it secondhand. I didn't call. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. Because consequences don't need narration. And because I was still learning something important, boundaries don't require an audience. They require consistency. The pressure campaign didn't stop just because the paperwork had spoken. It changed shape. One afternoon, a cousin I barely spoke to showed up at my door with a store-bought pie, like sugar could soften reality. She smiled too brightly, eyes darting behind me into my apartment, as if she expected to see something that explained my refusal. I just wanted to check on you, she said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. I didn't move back. I held the door frame. I'm fine, I said. Her smile tightened. Your mom is really hurting. I watched her carefully. Is she hurting, I asked, or is she angry she can't control this? My cousin blinked like she hadn't expected that phrasing. She's your mother, she said, as if that ended the conversation. She's still accountable, I replied. The pie sat between us like a bribe neither of us wanted to name. Another day, my uncle called from a number I didn't recognize. His voice came warm and heavy, the way people sound when they're trying to wrap manipulation in concern. You know, he said, families have disagreements, but this is tearing everyone apart. I could hear a television in the background, muffled sports commentary. He was talking about my life like it was a halftime debate. What exactly do you want from me? I asked. A pause. Then, carefully, just compromise. Compromise on what? I asked. Another pause. Maybe sign something smaller. Maybe let Karen manage day to day. You can still oversee. Oversee. A word that meant, let them do what they want while you carry the liability. No, I said. His tone sharpened. You're being stubborn. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I'm being clear, I said. There's a difference. The calls kept coming. Different relatives, different angles, same script. It wasn't always anger. Sometimes it was sadness. Sometimes it was nostalgia. Think of your grandmother, they'd say, as if Eleanor's life had been about keeping everyone comfortable. As if she hadn't built an entire legal structure to prevent exactly this. Sometimes it was a subtle threat. People are talking, someone said once, voice low. You don't want to be seen as the kind of person who, the sentence trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. I realized something in those weeks. My family didn't know how to talk to me without using pressure. They didn't know how to ask. They only knew how to insist. And I realized something else. I had been trained to feel guilty for not being easy. Now I was training myself to tolerate being disliked. The management firm's first full monthly report arrived as a secure link with attachments that looked boring until you read them closely. Spreadsheets, vendor logs, payment histories, approval chains, notes from site visits with actual dates and photos. I made coffee and sat down with the report like it was a mission brief. The smell wasn't comforting. It was grounding, bitter, hot, real. The longer I read, the tighter my stomach got. The patterns Eleanor had shown me weren't isolated. Emergency repairs repeated across different properties with the same vendor. Always just under approval thresholds. Reimbursements labeled tenant meeting that lined up with weekends in resort towns. Checks instead of transfers. Vague memos. A little fog built intentionally into the numbers. I called the firm's senior analyst. Her voice was calm and professional. We've identified inconsistencies, she said. Discretionary management practices were informal. Informal, I repeated. That's the polite word, she said. How bad? I asked. A pause, then, material. Not catastrophic, but significant and ongoing until we froze access. I stared at my notes. Not satisfaction, but grief. Being right about your own family doesn't feel like winning. It feels like confirming a bruise you spent years pretending wasn't there. Karen tried another angle. She called from an unknown number. When I answered, her voice was soft, almost shaky, like she wanted to sound human. I just want to talk, she said. I didn't respond right away. You know, Dad's not doing well, she added quickly. What exactly is wrong with him? I asked. A pause, then vague answers. Stress, blood pressure, not sleeping. It was guilt dressed as medical concern. He wasn't sleeping when Mom hit me either, I said. That didn't stop anyone. Her tone sharpened. You always do this, she snapped. You always make us sound like monsters. I'm not calling anyone a monster, I replied. I'm describing what happened. Silence. Then softness again. Can we meet? She asked. Public place, I said. And I'm leaving if you start pressuring me. She laughed bitterly. You're so dramatic. I'm so prepared, I corrected. We met at a coffee shop near a busy intersection. Bright lights, hard chairs, the smell of espresso and baked sugar. People tapping on laptops, laughing quietly, living normal lives around our family catastrophe. Karen arrived late, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She took them off slowly like the reveal mattered. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Whether from crying or from wanting me to believe she'd been crying, I couldn't tell. I don't understand why you hate me, she said immediately. I don't hate you, I said. I don't trust you. Because I manage things? She asked. Because I helped? You didn't help, I said quietly. You controlled. She leaned forward. You don't get it, she whispered. Dad built everything. Mom kept everything together. I was there. You weren't. I was deployed, I said. That doesn't mean I forfeited my right to exist. You chose that, she snapped. I chose to leave, I said. Because staying meant disappearing. You always make yourself the victim, she said. What do you want from me? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I want things to go back, she said finally. To what? I asked. To normal, she said. Normal. The normal where she was centered and I was expected to adapt. where my quietness was interpreted as consent. I'm not going back, I said. So, you're just going to destroy us? She demanded. I'm not destroying anything, I replied. I'm stopping something. You're so self-righteous, she muttered. I stood. We're done, I said. Of course, she snapped. Run away. I'm not running, I said. I'm leaving a conversation that's turning into pressure. I left her there. And the guilt tried to rise. The old reflex that says you're responsible for everyone's comfort. Then relief came in behind it. Quieter, but stronger. My mother tried next. She showed up at my building's entrance one evening, her hair perfect, her coat expensive, her posture rigid. She looked like she'd stepped out of a family portrait, except her eyes were sharp. My body remembered the slap before my mind did. For a second, my shoulders tightened, my breath shallow. Then I reminded myself, I'm not 17. I'm not trapped. I don't have to let her in, hello, I said, stopping a few feet away. Her smile appeared, thin and controlled. We need to talk, she said. We already did, I replied. Her eyes flicked to my cheek as if she expected to see a mark still there. I didn't mean, she began. I waited. The sentence shifted direction. This has gone too far, she said. You're humiliating your father. You hit me, I said. In front of 23 people. Her jaw tightened. You forced my hand, she said. The honesty of it almost knocked the air out of me. Do you hear yourself? I asked. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Families do what they have to do, she said. Karen needs support. Karen needs consequences, I replied. You think you're so disciplined, she hissed. So righteous. But you're still my daughter. The old part of me wanted to apologize, wanted to soothe, wanted to make it easy. I didn't. I am your daughter, I said. And I'm still allowed to say no. Her eyes widened slightly, offended by the concept. You're breaking this family, she whispered. No, I said. I'm breaking a pattern. This isn't what Eleanor would have wanted, she said, grabbing for my grandmother like a weapon. Eleanor built this, I said. On purpose. Eleanor was manipulated, my mother snapped. By you. I laughed once, short and humorless. Eleanor didn't need me to see what was happening, I said. She asked because she knew I would look. You always had to be different, she said. You always had to make things difficult. Leave, I said. Or what? She challenged. Or you'll be trespassing, I said evenly. And I will treat it like any other boundary violation. She looked like she might slap me again right there in public, then caught herself because she saw people moving behind the glass. She cared more about being seen as a good mother than being a good mother. You'll regret this, she said coldly. I already regretted being silent, I replied. I'm not doing that again. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply, each step a statement. Upstairs, I locked my door and leaned my forehead against it, my heart pounding. Not because I'd been threatened, but because I'd held the line. Holding a boundary is simple. It's just hard when you've been trained to believe your boundary is cruelty. Months passed. The books got cleaner. The system stabilized. Tenants stopped panicking. Vendors began following rules. The assets became what they should have been all along. Responsibilities managed with accountability, not family mythology. But my family didn't stop trying to rewrite the narrative. I heard I'd tricked Eleanor, that I'd stolen the inheritance, that I'd turned the lawyer against my parents, that I was greedy, cold, ambitious, brainwashed by the military. They needed a reason that wasn't simply, she said no. Because if the reason was my no, then they had to admit they'd never respected my yes either. Mr. Caldwell asked to meet privately in his office. It smelled faintly of paper and coffee and copier toner. He looked tired, older than he had in that living room. Your grandmother anticipated this, he said. I waited. She anticipated coercion, he continued. She anticipated the family trying to consolidate control. She built in protections. Did she say why she chose me? I asked. He nodded slowly. She said you were the only one who didn't need applause. She said you would do what was necessary, even if it made you unpopular. The words landed like weight and comfort at the same time. Your parents are considering options, he added carefully. Options like what? I asked. Litigation, he admitted. Not because they'll win, because they want leverage. Leverage? The word families like mine worship without naming. I nodded once. Let them try, I said. He studied me. You understand this will be ugly? I grew up with ugly, I replied. I just grew up calling it family. A demand letter arrived later. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was language about fairness and intent and misunderstanding, like someone trying to argue with a contract using feelings. I forwarded it to my attorney without responding. 2 days after that, my father called, his voice strained. Your mother wants to fight this, he said quietly. And what do you want? I asked. Silence long enough that I could hear the faint hum of his house through the line. I want it to stop, he said. I want peace. The old me would have jumped at that word. Peace. Harmony. The thing I'd spent my childhood chasing. Now I knew peace isn't peace if it requires my silence. Then tell her to stop, I said. He exhaled. I don't know if she can, he admitted. Some people confuse control with love so completely that losing control feels like dying. Karen's husband requested a conversation through my attorney. We met in a conference room. Glossy table, stiff chairs, a pitcher of water, and paper cups. The room smelled like disinfectant and toner. He looked worn down. I didn't know, he said immediately. I watched him carefully. Did you ask? I replied. He blinked. She said it was family money, he said. She said your parents wanted her to manage it. She said you didn't care. I cared enough not to sign it away, I said. He swallowed. I need to understand what's real, he said. What's real is paper, I replied. What's real is records. What's real is what can be proven. He nodded slowly, and I understood in that moment how far deception spreads when it's allowed to live unchecked. The threatened lawsuit never came. The demand letter was an attempt to regain control through intimidation. But intimidation only works when the person being intimidated still believes they're not allowed to refuse. I was past that. My mother tried softness again months later. A birthday card. A physical card, like nostalgia, could be a door. Inside she wrote, I hope one day you understand. No apology, no accountability, just the same message. Asterisk, you're wrong. You just haven't realized it yet. Asterisk, I placed it with the other letters. Then my father asked to meet again. We went back to the diner. Same burnt coffee. Same neon hum. Same vinyl booths. But he sat differently this time. Not like the head of a table. Like a man trying to learn how to be human without authority. I've been thinking about something, he said, staring at his mug. I waited. When you were little, he said slowly. You never asked for much. I learned early not to, I replied. He nodded, eyes glossy. We called it strength, he said. We praised you for it. We praised me for being convenient, I said. He flinched, then nodded again. Yes, he said. We did. I thought I was being a good father, he said. I thought I was teaching you resilience. You taught me not to expect care, I replied. He stared down at his hands. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded strange coming from him, like a language he'd only practiced alone. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. You do what you should have done then, I said. You stop asking me to disappear. He nodded once. I'm trying, he said. I see that, I replied. When we left the diner, he didn't touch my shoulder. He didn't need to. The distance between us wasn't physical. It was built from years of assumptions. And assumptions don't collapse in one conversation. They collapse through repetition. No. Until the pattern breaks. A year after the meeting, I visited Eleanor's grave alone. The ground was damp. The air smelled like wet leaves and stone. Wind pushed gently against my coat. You were right, I said quietly. About the numbers, about the roles, about me. I didn't cry. I felt gratitude. She'd given me proof, and proof is what turns a no into something no one can argue with. On the drive home, I thought about that living room again. The folding chairs, the good dishes, the crowd of witnesses, the sound of my mother's slap, the way my father's voice turned into a roar when he felt control slipping. And I thought about the moment the paperwork hit the table and the room changed shape. It wasn't my anger that saved me. It wasn't revenge. It was preparation. It was clarity. It was boundaries backed by truth. The money was never the point. The point was the assumption that I could be pressured into surrender because I was quiet. Quiet isn't consent. Quiet is sometimes survival. And survival has an expiration date. Eventually, you either keep shrinking or you take up the space you were always entitled to. I used to believe being the easy one was the same as being loved. Now, I know being loved should not cost you your voice. You always have a choice. Sometimes you just don't have proof yet. Boundaries are not betrayal. Clarity is not cruelty. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the truth speak for itself. I'm curious, have any of you ever been put in a similar position where you had to stand your ground against your own family? Or perhaps you had to find your voice after years of being told to be quiet? Tell me what you think or share your own stories in the comments below. I really want to know.